Hello, once again, dear friends, and welcome to the Main Object Big Book Study of Alcoholics Anonymous. I'm an alcoholic. My name is David. Need to say that part first. And I've asked my friend Michelle to read the AA preamble. Let's see, is it? Yeah, there we go. And that should be on your screen, Michelle.
Hey, good morning, everyone. I'm Michelle. I'm an alcoholic. This is the A preamble. Alcoholics Anonymous is a fellowship of people who share their experience, strength, and hope with each other that they may solve their common problem and help others to recover from alcoholism. The only requirement for membership is a desire to stop drinking. There are no dues or fees for AA membership. We are self-supporting through our own contributions. AA is not allied with any sect, denomination, politics, organization, or institution, does not wish to engage in any controversy, neither endorses nor opposes any causes. Our primary purpose is to stay sober and help other alcoholics to achieve sobriety. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. Appreciate it. And So, just so everyone knows, and there may be one or two new people here today, we are a line by line big book study. So, the idea is that unlike traditional big book meetings or the kind of big book meetings that I was brought up in, where you read a full chapter at a time, what I discovered really only through COVID, when COVID came on and meetings went online, started going to different types of big book meetings. And if you haven't been there, I'd highly recommend. I know Robbie likes this meeting too. Is Bronx Big Book Study. That's like for me, that's the gold standard of big book study meetings. And one of the things that I found is that they go through the text at a very slow pace. And by doing that, I don't know if anybody else has encountered this, but when I would be in a meeting that would read a full chapter at a time, it always felt like trying to drink from a fire hose. There was just so much coming at you, and it was almost like by trying to get it all in one shot, so much was lost. And so what we do is we go slowly, and the idea is to really turn the big book not just into a piece of literature, but a tool that not only sets us free, but gives us the gift, the power of being able to share and set others free or help others find a higher power that will set them free. So, one of the key things we do is we categorize the text we use 5 categories, and most people are probably a little tired of me going over this, but I want to make sure everybody's got it. These categories are questions, directions and explanations, promises, warnings, history. The colors that you see there are the highlighter colors that I use that really helps me quickly reference those parts of the book. And just our format is I'll talk about the text a little bit up until about 7, and then we will open it up for questions. Also, just FYI, the meeting is being recorded, and that's because we keep an archive over on YouTube. We only record the audio version, no video, and only my part is recorded at the beginning. So no one needs to be worried that their comments are going to be out there for the world to hear. So with that said, we're going to start on page 53 near the top. We are in We Agnostics. We're talking about logic and the journey towards faith. And I'll just summarize. Bill has established already that our own unfortunate tendency towards prejudice and superstition is often limited or stymied our spiritual growth and kept us from fairly evaluating the benefits of actually introducing a higher power into our lives. And with having, in the last section, he helped us clear away this all too common barrier, that tendency towards prejudice and superstition. So, having eliminated this barrier, Bill now gets to the heart of the matter by addressing the primary cause of our spiritual malady. And we're going to see this, and that is our prideful over-reliance upon logic and reason. Now, as we see on page 58, Bill is careful not to throw the baby out with the bathwater, however. He makes the case that logic, and we'll see, it's where we start today. Logic is great stuff. He points out that we absolutely need logic to navigate life's challenges. But not only that, Bill goes on to make the case that if we are to consider a relationship with a higher power, we must employ our logic and reason to consider the real facts of the matter. He then goes on to make the case that the critical barrier is not logic. Logic is not the problem. Our critical barrier appears to actually be pride. And you know what? That's just, it's a subtle message that he makes there, and it's inferred. So I'm going to, and if you don't agree with me, you can certainly push back. But I think it's at least it's pretty clear to me. While he doesn't state this directly, the problem of pride is strongly inferred when Bill points out that we must be crushed by a self-imposed crisis we couldn't postpone or evade. So having brought ourselves to such a point, we are then we're then confronted, I guess you could say, with a critical choice. God is everything or else he is nothing. Bill then poses a series of reflective questions intended to show us that we've actually been depending on faith all along. He pushes this issue and pushes us to consider that we've actually spent our entire lives worshiping many people, places, things, and principles, including logic itself. And as we'll see, by facing this, Bill shows us that taking those last steps towards the what he calls the shore of faith is actually much easier than we ever thought. So, with that said, let's look at the top of page 53. We're starting with the paragraph, logic is great stuff, and that entire paragraph, there's some, there might be some rewards and warnings sprinkled in, but I highlighted the whole thing as direction, and so the whole thing is in green. And he makes a critical distinction in the second line of this paragraph. He says, well, first of all, he starts out, logic is great stuff. We liked it. We still like it. So we don't have a problem with logic. It is not by chance we were given the power to reason, to examine the evidence of our senses, and to draw conclusions. Now, there are three words there that up until recently, actually up until this week when I was reviewing this text, that I always just raced right over and never considered. But I think the three words are that they're critical to our discussion today. And that is, we were given. It is not by chance we were given the power to reason. What's he mean there? He doesn't say it's not by chance that we developed the power. It's not, see, I didn't develop my power of reason. I was given it. And while he doesn't say by a higher power, who else is going to give us that? Who else is going to give us reason? So it's that notion that logic and reason are gifts that we've received from our higher power. So we were given the power to reason, to examine the evidence of our senses, and to draw conclusions. That's basically the definition of reason right there. And hold on one moment, folks. I just want to make sure I don't miss, because there are some important definitions. Yeah. So when we're thinking about logic, and I have these in the chat, logic is, and I really relied pretty heavily today on my 1939 dictionary to see what Bill was thinking when he used these words. Logic, the science of correct reasoning. And then reason, as we've just defined, but it's also defined in the dictionary as to deduce conclusions from facts. Basically, to take facts and then build conclusions based on those facts. So he's talking about using the evidence of our senses to draw conclusions. This is one of man's magnificent attributes. We agnostically inclined. So those of us who haven't yet made a commitment to either God or no God, we're on the fence. Those of us on the fence, we would not feel satisfied with a proposal which does not lend itself to a reasonable approach and interpretation. So what he's saying, remember, first of all, the chapter is called We Agnostics. So it's for those of us who are on the fence or may not have the level of faith that we need in order to live to good purpose. What he's saying is, hey, don't worry. We're not going off on some wild goose chase here. We're going to consider this question of faith through using logic and reason. Hence, we are at pains, and I looked it up. At pains means to try hard to do something. So we're going to try hard to tell you why we think our present faith is reasonable, why we think it is more sane and logical, there's that word, logic, to believe than not to believe, why we say our former thinking was soft and mushy when we threw up our hands in doubt and said, we don't know. And in case the point's not clear there, what he's saying is when we may have thought we were being logical when we said, we don't know about God. We can't say. What Bill's point is, he's saying it's the opposite. He's saying when we're going, we don't know, we're not actually being logical. We're not using reason. We are getting caught in soft and mushy thinking. And that's what he goes on to show through the rest of what we'll read today. This next paragraph, except for the last sentence, which is a question, so that will be in orange. Everything else, again, is in green, direction. When we became alcoholics, crushed by a self-imposed crisis we could not postpone or evade, we had to fearlessly face the proposition that either God is everything or else he is nothing. God either is or he isn't. What was our choice to be? Ladies and gentlemen, and that last sentence, what was our choice to be? One of the most important questions in the entire first 164 pages. So, I think the crux of the chapter is actually in this paragraph. And the reason I say this is, let's circle back for a second. When we became alcoholics, crushed by a self-imposed crisis we could not postpone or evade. Okay. And that's where I go to the issue of pride. And what Bill is saying, remember, at the beginning, early days of AA, they dealt with mostly low bottom cases. And it wasn't so much about rescuing somebody from Skid Row when we're talking about low bottom cases. It's people who have been, think about being crushed by a self-imposed crisis we could not postpone or evade. And I've been talking with folks that I sponsor lately about this notion of what our alcoholism does is it destroys our worldview. It destroys the principles by which we live, so that we have to consider new principles. I'm going to say ideally it does, because there are a lot of reasons people come to AA. And sometimes they come because their life has been devastated by alcoholism. That's how it was when I came here, although I was sent here by a judge. And I'm one of the few people I know, and I'm not making myself special, it's just one of the facts of my journey. I'm one of the few people I know who actually did get sober during the period that I was court ordered to come to Alcoholics Anonymous. And there are a lot of people who come because a spouse threatens them or a job threatens them. And some of those people stick. However, Bill's point is that this being crushed by a self-imposed crisis is actually, he almost sees it as a necessity because of, I'm going to go back to this. Whoops, hold on 1 second, gang. There's something I want to bring to everyone's attention, and I think I put a link in the... Remember this? Our commitment spiral? I played with it again, made some changes. It's like I'm obsessed with this thing for some reason, because I wanted to put ego deflation at the top. Because what he's talking about is ego deflation. So anyway, so we're crushed by a self-imposed crisis that we could not postpone or evade. And I'll just say one more thing about that. For some of us, including myself, that crushing can come a long time into our sobriety. We can be sober and be crushed. So God is everything or he is nothing. Now, also, I think it's important that we consider the choice that Bill is putting before us. Because often we get caught in this notion of faith, in that we believe for us it's a question of, is there a God or isn't there a God? But what Bill's saying, that's not the question for us as alcoholics. As alcoholics, it's God is everything or he is nothing. And the difference is, for years I said, yes, there is a God. And God and I are sort of in partnership. You know, I saw it in my pride and my ego and my self-importance. I saw it as a relationship of maybe not equals, but like of pilot and co-pilot. And so like there were things that God took the wheel on, and there were things that I took the wheel on. And Bill is saying, au contraire, he's everything or he's nothing. What is our choice to be? And God either is or he isn't. What was our choice to be? So, anyway, moving on. Arrived at this point, we were squarely confronted with the question of faith. Again, that's a direction, as is the next sentence, direction. We couldn't duck the issue. Here we go. Why? Because Bill is assuming we're coming here crushed by a self-imposed crisis. Think about that. Crushed. When I look back at when I got sober, I only realized after I'd been here a while that I was crushed. When I first got here, it's frightening to me today how casually I took this thing when I started out. And what he's saying is that this crisis that we've created has crushed us to the point where we have to face the issue. Some of us had already walked far over the bridge of reason towards the desired shore of faith. That means I've used my reason to consider the question of God, which is important. But I'm going to now, the text now shifts gears a little bit, I think anyway. The next sentence is, and I've been, just so, I don't know if you've noticed, gang, but I used to really enjoy like double highlighting, like this is a question or this is direction, but it's also a promise. I've been trying to avoid that only because for simplicity's sake. But this one I couldn't avoid because, and I'll explain why. The next two sentences are both reward and direction. And there's a reason. I really thought this through. So we're crossing from we're on the bridge of reason, crossing to the shore of faith. Because remember when I've said in the past, and I think we've agreed, that Bill, he might not have intended it, but today we can read certain parts as being intended for two audiences, the newcomer and the quote-unquote recovered alcoholic. And I think, here's what I think, just to cut to the chase. I think for the newcomer, the next two sentences are a reward. For the recovered alcoholic, their direction. And why am I saying that? The outlines and promise of the new land had brought luster to tired eyes and fresh courage to flagging spirits. Luster means brightness. Okay, so it brightened up tired eyes. Notice that new land is capitalized. Typically, when Bill capitalizes something, he means that it has to do with God or worship or divinity in some form. So this promise of a new land, so there's a subtle assumption there. The new land is one of dependence upon a higher power. The outlines and the promise of the new land had brought luster to tired eyes and fresh courage to flagging spirits. Friendly hands had stretched out in welcome. That last sentence, well, actually both of them. It's a promise, you've been beat up by alcoholism, self-imposed crisis, all of that, crushed, and here's what you're going to find when you get here. Okay, great promise. An even more important piece of direction. Meaning, friendly hands. What does that tell me? Imagine that I'm, this thing from bridge to shore. Imagine that I'm crossing a bridge, but that last piece, there's no road. Okay? And but it's only like maybe, I don't know, a few feet. But on the other side are people. Now, these are the recovered alcoholics. And what kind of mood or approach or demeanor am I seeing in those new people? They are friendly. So, what does that tell you about how we should treat newcomers? And I will say that most meetings I attend today, especially GMA online, absolutely over the top, slam dunk, you know, friendly hands. But also, what is it telling us? It's telling us that not only are these people friendly, but they are telling us, the hurting alcoholic, about the promise of a new land. Is my message, so there's a critical question, is my message consistently conveying the promise of a new land rooted, and new land capitalized, rooted in a new life based on dependence upon a higher power? The next sentence is direction. We were grateful that reason had brought us so far. I would say that's more an explanation, but it's green, okay? And there's a little bit of a warning, so then the rest of the paragraph I put in pink. But somehow we couldn't quite step ashore. Perhaps we had been leaning too heavily on reason that last mile, and we did not like to lose our support. And here's something, again, that I only saw this week when I was reviewing the text. It's a subtle thing. But look at the word reason in that last sentence. It's capitalized. Well, that's sort of weird, because why is he capitalizing it? Let's just put a bookmark there, and let's read the next couple paragraphs and see what we find, okay? Maybe there's something revealed there. He's almost saying, like, reason is like some kind of god or something. Okay. The next sentence, that was natural, but let us think a little more closely. Direction, green. And now he starts, what we are going to see are probably the most abundant use of our orange highlighter in the whole book. Lots of questions coming at us. The next sentence is a question. Without knowing it, had we not been brought to where we stood by a certain kind of faith? For did we not believe in our own reasoning? And looking at our definitions, just so we're on the same page, here's what I think is critical. Faith was one of those, when I looked it up in the dictionary here, it had several definitions. And usually I try to pick one that's most important, but there were two here, and I think they're equally important. Faith, the assent of the mind, that means basically almost the surrender of the mind to divine revelation. So that's sort of the spiritual connotation of faith. However, there's another definition of faith which I think is equally important. The trust in the honesty and truth of another. Think about that for a second, because when I think back on my AA journey, before I could have faith in a higher power, I needed to have faith in you, AA members. I needed to believe that you believed. I needed to feel that I could trust you, that you were good people, that you weren't going to hurt me, that you weren't going to criticize me. So I think both definitions are important. In fact, I would say I was only, in my own case, I was only able to come to the faith in a divine providence through my belief in all of you. Oh,
David, can I ask you to give us that second definition again, please, of faith?
trust in the honesty and truth of another. No problem, Robbie. Okay. Did we not have confidence in our ability? So I'm at the top of 54. Did we not have confidence in our ability to think? What was that but a sort of faith? Yes. And the rest of the paragraph I have as warning. Yes, we had been faithful, abjectly faithful, to the, hold on, God of reason. Look at that. Capitalize. What Bill is saying, and this is why on the page before, reason is capitalized. He's making the case that while reason is critical, unfortunately, remember, we're the ones that were crushed by a self-imposed crisis. So what's he saying there? Part of what crushed us is we made reason and logic our higher power, rather than a gift that allows us to reach our higher power. Does that make sense? Putting the cart before the horse. So in one way or another, we discovered that faith had been involved all the time. What do we got time-wise? Okay. Since we follow the same theme, I'm gonna try to finish this next paragraph and then we'll be done. The first two sentences here are warning. Continue the warning in pink. We found too that we had been worshippers. What a state of mental goose flesh that used to bring on. Meaning, to call somebody a worshipper means previously we would have had a lot of objections to that. Ooh, we don't want to deal with worship. But what he's saying is, au contraire, folks, we were worshiping. The problem is we were just worshiping the wrong thing. And that's the point that he makes here through these questions. Had not we varied, and so now we have a series of questions. Had we not variously worshipped people, sentiment, things, money, and ourselves? And then, with a better motive, had we not worshipfully, easy for me to say, beheld the sunset, the sea, or a flower? Another question. Who of us had not loved something or somebody? How much did these feelings, these loves, these worships have to do with pure reason? That means we had to take a leap. So, I am not a sports fan, okay? I'm sorry to admit it, I'm just not. But I think okay, I went to Penn State, blue, big blue, all of that. And so there were people that used to paint their faces and their chests in blue and all of that and go to the football. Oh, Sandy and Dave. Yeah, you get it, right? Yes, there we go. We are. Never mind. No, that's an outside issue. Sorry, folks. So anyway, for those people who had painted themselves in blue, I'm sure if I would have asked them to give me the logic or the rationale behind what you're doing, maybe they could to some point, but it's a leap of faith. It's something they can't describe. It's an inner sense. And he's saying we need to bring the same thing to our higher power. How much did these feelings, these loves, these worships have to do with pure reason? Little or nothing, we saw at last, and that's a warning. Or you could say it's, well, you could argue it's direction. We'll make that a wild card. Okay, just that little sentence. Another question. Were not these things the tissue out of which our lives were constructed? We built our lives, and I would say our worldview, upon these beliefs, these things that we worshipped. Did not these feelings, after all, determine the course of our existence? And then we finish with a warning. It was impossible to say we had no capacity for faith, or love, or worship. In one form or another, we had been living by faith and little else. So what he's saying is, for somebody saying, well, I can't take that leap because I'm not sure, what Bill's saying is, hey folks, you've been taking a leap all along, just in the wrong direction. Does that make sense? Okay, so I went over. So sorry. Once again. So why don't we open it up with that? So I have some questions. You can see they're in the Donna and or Rich posted them there. But basically we're talking about faith, reason, logic, and taking that leap.